Good morning, MCPC. Good morning, Cleveland. How are you all today? Great. I don't know about that story. It's so energizing, but I'm kind of going insane just being 20 hours here in the cold as opposed to 20 months. My skin color and my makeup is a little different. I grew up in Bangalore, India. So I got in last night and I literally thought my ears were going to fall off. But, you know, my blood is going a little thin from having lived 6 years on the East Coast in college, but I'm excited to be back. What I want to talk to you today about is the nature of innovation and how innovation is what becomes the lifeblood of successful companies. Okay, good. All right, got the right clicker, important. And this is important because as every one of us think about what separates the boys from the men, the girls from the women, the winners in the society and the winners in technology, innovation's becoming the types of changes that brings companies like Apple to success. When I thought about game changing, you look in the internet, you probably find a lot of references to game changing. I didn't think that Sarah Palin would be probably the best example to talk about in Ohio, so that's not the topic of my talk. There's a great book by Lafley, who is the CEO of Procter & Gamble, that talked about how do you game change and how he was successful in doing this for Procter & Gamble. And it's a great book. I'd recommend reading this. And he's an example of a great leader in ways in which he was able to predictably drive profit growth, set up business units, and do this over and over again. And we have plenty of examples of this. The person on the left, Tesla, Thomas Edison, or Steve Jobs. These are folks who are icons in our world, in our industry, in our history of innovating. And these folks had this in their lifeblood from the point of where they thought about making solutions simpler, easier, and many of them will go down as legends whose technology, some of whom we even use today. You have them also in the context of our own city. University hospitals, Cleveland Clinic. These are now increasingly brands that are becoming known across the world for innovation in healthcare. And it's going to be a place where you're starting to see this now replicated in different parts of the world. So innovation becomes something that not just touches technology and improves the way in which we use technology, it could also save people's lives. As you think about this, there's three contexts to innovation that I want to focus on today. Okay? One is product, because many of us are technologists. The second and the third are going to feel a little bit more soft. The process way in which you innovate, and the people way in which you innovate, because they're just as important. These three P's, the product, the process, and the people, are the ways in which I've sought to build an innovation culture in my time at SAP, and what we're doing also at VMware. And you'll find that the more that you build this into your organization, into your processes, and if you're in the technology industry, into products, you are able to separate from the laggards and become a leader. We were very fortunate at VMware. We're one of the fastest growing software companies in the history of enterprise software. In fact, I think the fastest growing. We've gone from 0 to 5 billion in 15 years. And just to put that in context, it took Microsoft about 22 years to get there. It took SAP about 28 years to get to that level. And Forbes ranked companies among the top 100, ranked Salesforce number 1, VMware number 3, and Amazon number 7 in the most recent ranking of innovative companies in 2013. And this comes from the culture that we've built into the product organization and also into our go-to-market, that we're always going to defy convention. If things can't be done in a certain way, we're going to find a way by which we can get it done in a disruptive way so that it lowers cost and brings a better and faster benefit to our customers. And there's a great book written by one of my professors at Harvard Business School, Clay Christensen, called Disruptive Innovation. And it talks about time and time again where you have a perceived leader in a particular area, and over time there comes a faster and nimbler way to be able to do things. And if you're not on the wave of driving that innovation, you get disrupted. And that's the story, not just in Silicon Valley. If you look at the forces shaping IT today, much of this is much more than just buzzwords. There are more mobile phones today than there are toothbrushes. I don't know if that's a good or a bad stat, but that's the fact. Cloud computing. This is something that your grandparents probably know about. My kids know, they've heard about it. It's much more than a rainy cloud over Florida. Big data. By the time I've finished my talk today, there will be enough amount of data to fill the Library of Congress 500 times over, created across the world. That's the amount of data that we're talking about. And of course, social computing has not just brought down governments in the Arab Spring, it's actually making a difference in the way in which we collaborate today, that I'll talk about more. So as we look at this context, we've set ourselves a mission to say, listen, we want to help companies move from a mainframe era where the sort of the modus operandi was thousands of users, hundreds of apps, and it was all about control, to a client-server era that we saw through the 80s and some of the 90s, where potentially you got to millions of users, thousands of apps, and you started to build some silos. You had some ERP applications. But now as we think about the next era, it is mobile cloud. Now, you cannot run things in the context of control or silos. Everything is about building things as a service. So it's not just software as a service, the typical way in which you think about cloud computing. It is now IT as a service, where everything is built, whether it's in a private or a public cloud, to be able to serve your constituents. Now, as we think about this, we think that virtualization technology is one of those key technologies that can help you build that bridge to the mobile world clear. Why? Because it's helping liberate the resources from the client-server world and help you move into this mobile cloud era. And we think that the more that every one of you, as you think about yourselves, if you're senior IT folks or line of business folks, can help prepare the world for mobile cloud, we think that that's the next era. The Gen Y world today and the Gen X world is completely in the mobile. And for most of the folks today who are building modern IT infrastructure, especially those startups, whether it's Silicon Valley or in Shanghai or in Bangalore, they're building all the infrastructure in the cloud. So as we think about this, we began to ask ourselves, how can we help? Every one of you in IT, if you're a CIO or a leader of technology, has this problem where you've got 30% of your money that is free for innovation, and the other 70% is locked up in maintenance. And it sort of feels like these shackles around your ankles where you can't innovate because you've got all of this money locked up in maintenance of infrastructure that you... And the more that we can change that dynamic where it's the opposite, 70% potentially open for innovation, 30% in maintenance, you start changing the way in which you can drive innovation. So we've found as we've surveyed all of our customers, for on average, now you have some goods and some bads, but on average, many of our customers who have driven virtualization in the data center, on the desktop, and many other areas have started to change that from 30 to 40%. And we think as you drive this to an IT as a service goal, all of you should be driving to that goal of about 50%, where significant parts of your infrastructure are virtualized, and there's significant benefits you can get from both CapEx and OpEx in doing that. And as you do that, you will find that you free up more and more money for innovation. And what do you do with that innovation? You build new applications. There could be millions of applications. In the old world, you thought of things as traditional apps. They were client-server, and increasingly, potentially, new apps, Python, and so on and so forth. But as you think about the new world, mobile now is becoming a significant part of your new innovation. This was a survey I thought to just give you a sense of how important mobile was. People were asked, what would you give up for a week to keep your mobile phone, okay? And I'm going to share with you the results of this. 22% said they would give up brushing their teeth. 55% said they'd give up caffeine. 54% said exercise. And 33% said a three-letter word that I had to drop because I wanted to keep this presentation PG-13, okay? But you get the sense of how important mobile now has become a part of the way in which you exist. No longer are you going to go back to your desktop and try to log in through VPN to get email. It's now on your mobile client. My dad uses that, and he's 74 years old. My kids now increasingly are looking at ways by which they can use technology. It took my 4-year-old twins, when they were 2 years old, probably 15 seconds to figure out the swipe on an iPad. And I thought to myself, when I finally put a desktop or a laptop in front of these two boys, they're going to expect the screen on the laptop to move just the same way in terms of swipe technology. So this is the world in which we live in. And as we thought about that at VMware, the fundamental ways in which we believe we can innovate with you is in 3 critical blocks to drive IT as a service. One is to ensure that we can radically help reframe the data center so it's software-driven, okay? And the more that you can drive things through software, the more you drive costs. So we call that a software-defined data center, which I'm going to describe to you in a second. Second is to help build the frame for where that software-defined data center is going, which is cloud computing. And you might either have this on-premise, private cloud, or public cloud. So we call that continuum of on-premise, private cloud, or public cloud a hybrid cloud computing environment. And the third is to be able to drive this in a fantastic new fashion with delightful, delicious user experiences to end-user computing. And that's the area that I'm involved in that I will also talk about a little further. So let me describe this to you, because I find that often in the technology industry, we end up with a lot of jargon, a lot of buzzwords, and when we define this in simple terms to the CIO, they just get lost and they kind of tune out. In fact, one of the things I found as I joined VMware, there were so many products that started with V that it was sort of confusing even for me. I still probably I need a glossary even for our own product. So I basically simplified this on the back of a napkin in what I describe to CIOs today. This is what I'm going to describe in the next few minutes is the simple proposition of how we want to help our customers go from D to D, from data center to device, okay? So pay attention. This is 2 or 3 minutes of the entire story of VMware told on one slide. First off, we start with the data center. We say, listen, there are typically 3 constructs of what you're looking to automate or manage or virtualize. It's servers, which are compute, storage, and networking. Typically, those are the 3 aspects of a converged infrastructure. And the more that you can drive that through software rather than hardware, you lower costs. I heard one reporter talk about a software-defined approach to do it as saying, think of software as the wine inside the wine bottle and hardware as the wine bottle. It's not that the bottle is not important, it's just that the wine's more important because you're able to get the delicious aspects, and you could probably use any bottle. So our view is very similar. We think hardware is very important, absolutely is very important, but the juice and the secret and the DNA all happens in the wine inside that wine bottle, which is the software-defined way in which you approach things. So the more that you drive your software-defined infrastructure in that fashion, so server storage and networking, we've done this and begun to do this in the on-premise world. And now increasingly, a lot of us are being asked, listen, where do we think about this in the cloud computing world? Do we take that workload and put this on-premise? Do we create a private managed service, or do we put this in a public cloud? We want to help drive that in a infrastructure as a service, so we've built out now what's called a vCloud hybrid service, which internally is to ensure that you have the exact same technology in each of those areas. This gets managed and automated in a very easy way. Not the old world was systems management in the mainframe type of era or client-server era. You need to think about management for the cloud computing world. So in the cloud management area, we've been fortunate to be ranked by IDC as #1. Because as you think about cloud management, it's a very different way. You have to manage some things that are in a data center, and sometimes you've got to manage things that are in the cloud. And this becomes the bridge, as you call that collective effort, the software-defined data center, to end-user computing, where when you think about desktops, to tablets, to phones, to collaborative processes like social computing, you can ensure that they're managed, they're secure, and virtualized. This is very simply the proposition of what we're trying to help our customers. And I got through that without having to describe a V product, okay? Now let me talk a little bit about kind of the innovation that we're trying to drive in the context of end-user computing, because this is important. And we feel that there's a fundamental shift happening in the context of end users. These are the 2 C's that the end users and IT tend to fight about. The end users want choice, the IT folks want control. Choice means I want to be able to use my applications wherever. I could be in Hawaii, I could be in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, I could be here in Cleveland, I could be in Bangalore where I grew up, or could be in Shanghai. Why do you care whether, I almost think when you think about today, people used to have these notes in their email that says, I'm out of office. Sort of that out of office note has become obsolete. Unless you're really on vacation, you're really not out of office. You're within access of technology. Certainly you can get email. You can even get email today in the planes, okay? I'm not saying that I'm pontificating here what your work-life balance needs to be, but the notion of out of office is almost obsolete. We're in a world where we can work anywhere, any place, anytime. Yet, we do need, as IT professionals, to be able to provide appropriate amounts of automation, policy, ensuring that it's secure and managed, because we can't be in a world where all of the regulated documents that we have sit in Dropbox or Google Drive or Box or whatever have you, and then you've lost control of the environment. So this yin and yang of choice and control is something that we have to wrestle with. And the good news is today, with a lot of the approaches in end-user computing that we and other partners of ours are building, it is possible to achieve that dream. So our goal, our mission statement is very simple. We want to drive a secure workspace to allow every one of you to work at the speed of life. Think of that. Each of you are conducting your life at various different speeds, and we want you to allow you to work at that speed. This means that whether you're using devices, apps, content, anywhere, any place, anytime, all of this is very securely provisioned and managed. So you start off with a desktop, then you move to a laptop, then you pick up your tablet, then you move to a phone, or finally you get into your Tesla, or whatever your favorite car is. And you might think that last example is, not something that's out there. Today, the modern car has more software than the original spacecraft in 1970. Okay, it's a true fact. So today, if you think about that car, it's on the internet. We heard from our Cisco presenter about the Internet of Things. Your car, your thermostat, many of these machines now have to be managed, secured, and potentially even virtualized. So when you think about this potential, all the way from a desktop to potentially wearable computing, the more that we can help manage, secure this, and allow you to work anywhere, any place, anytime, we believe that vision is just around the horizon. That's what we're trying to deliver. As we do this, we've built a product suite that's now become one of the envies of the industry in end-user computing. We have a desktop set of products for physical and virtual, View and Mirage. We're building out more in our mobile portfolio. And we have a social computing platform, and I'm going to tell the story best probably through some of the customer vignettes of how these are being successfully used. So with that, what I would like to do is segue into a customer testimonial. As you see this, we're going to actually translate ourselves to a much warmer part of the world, Malaysia, okay? And the reason I wanted to share this, because education in a different part of the world is very different. We take for granted, for example, when we go to our schools, that every one of the schools have desktops. In many parts of the world, they don't. And this is a fantastic story of how you can bring education to the masses with a virtualized desktop experience. So let's roll the video of the Malaysian Ministry of Education.
I am an English teacher in Sekolah Kebangsaan Sawah Sempadan in Tanjung Karang, Malaysia.
In Malaysia, we have more than 10,000 schools scattered all over the country. The concern is actually by using a normal conventional PC in teaching and learning, every cycle of desktop is going to be a very, very big issue to the Ministry of Education themselves. So they want something to be more simpler, more robust, as well as more easy.
And the most important part, we can reduce the digital gap for the students which live in the rural and the urban area.
Okay, the solutions that we propose and then we presented to the government is integrating VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, plus with thin client solution, together with a full suite of other PC components.
As far we are known and as proven before this, the VMware is the most reliable and effective virtualization platform that I have in the world.
VMware is the only unique component that we have and we propose to the government, whereas other hardware can work harmoniously together with VMware with regards to PCOIP protocol. We also perform proof of concept as well as pilot project for 1.5 years before we are granted with the award by the government of Malaysia. And then we actually given 150 calendar days for us to complete 1,250 schools nationwide.
We are very proud right now because around 3 months, I think we can install around 700 schools that are using the VDI client. And the student there and the teacher there are very love to use the application, the system there.
Some of the pupils from year 1, I mean the lower primary, they cannot even know how to drag the mouse. But when they were learning at the school, they can do the Excel, and then do the PowerPoint. That is the part that they like most, the PowerPoint part, because they can make movie from that.
A lot of people told it's not quite possible to achieve a numbers of 1,250 schools to be completed in 150 days. With regards to this track record, we can broadcast to the whole world to tell the world that even in a remote area, even in the jungle, we can have high technology installed and being utilized to the better of education by using ICT as tools to teach and learning.
So you see there an example of a school in a part of the world where education is very, very important. It's one of the fastest growing countries in the world. And we think education is one of those areas where it's been one of our parts of our business that's exploding. If you are a partner or a customer in that segment, we're very excited. We're seeing the same thing in healthcare. A lot of customers. I was with, this morning with the CIO of a healthcare institution. And a lot of the ways in which he's thinking about the ways in which he could deploy more nimbly, especially in the context of a lot of the changes in the Affordable Health Care Act and so on and so forth. We think that that's another segment. There's going to be a lot of innovation where you don't have to think about virtualization of desktop and virtualization of apps. You can think of this as one more unified process. We're very excited about the investment we're making in these. And there are many, many other sectors that are ripe for being able to take that same benefit that we showed you of data center virtualization all the way to the desktop. Okay? And the more that you have a unified architecture from data center to device, the more you reduce all the costs and piece parts of things that could be in between. So as we think about this, we asked ourselves, why is it? Many of you have heard the term VDI. It's not like this is a new term. Why is it that this has not taken off? Okay? I'm relatively new to the VDI industry. I spent most of my 15 years in the analytics and big data world at SAP and other world. And the first thing as I noticed as I talked to CIOs, they said, listen, this thing is just too darn complicated. The legacy players have made it too expensive. And quite frankly, if I'm just going to go back to deploying software on each of the desktops and laptops, it's too expensive. And there was a litany of failed projects from many of the legacy players in this space. So we began to ask ourselves, how do we, again, innovate in a game-changing fashion? We've got to make sure the performance is breakneck speed. So everything from the protocol to the way in which this is delivered, it should rival as if the software is sitting on your laptop. Secondly, the user experience has got to be delightful. This has got to be just sort of like the internet era of consumerization of IT. If it doesn't feel like Facebook in the enterprise world, people aren't going to use it. But here was the kicker. The cost part of it has just got to fundamentally drop down. Because if you can't lower the cost to be lower than the cost of a laptop or a desktop, CIOs are going to say, listen, it's too complicated. I'm just going to go back to just deploying things, and I'll manage the security. And so we felt that there was one key way in which this could be driven in a much more cloud-enabled way called desktop as a service. It could be either on-premise desktop as a service, where you're managing your business users' IT as a service. It could be private cloud, or it could be public cloud. But in each of those, you needed a multi-tenant architecture to drive that. That's innovation. So we found this company, Desktone, that was doing this the best of anybody in the industry. They were the first at doing multi-tenant architectures, probably 2 or 3 years the rest of the competition, had built a technology on our stack, and had partnered with some of our key partners. Partners like Cisco, partners like Dell, partners like the VCE relationship, NetApp, many others, Navisite, many of the folks who are here. And we acquired them in October. So this goes to show that sometimes the innovation doesn't have to always come from within. It could come from these pioneering companies that you're able to find that's innovation, but you've got to layer them in quickly and then drive innovation. We're very excited about this. And the good news was we announced this in October, and then sort of a month later, Amazon announced their solution in this space. And then, in December, we partnered with Cisco, and we're the lead solution for their desktop as a service. So we're very excited about this joint solution. If this is an area where you're looking to drive cost, we think it's going to be a fundamental proposition. But let me drive a little bit further into the cost, because this is very important for you to understand the way we think about innovation, okay? And this is going to feel a little bit like an eye chart, but let me walk you through this left to right. There's typically 4 or 5 key elements of the cost in deploying desktop virtualization. There's the cost of the VDI software itself, desktop and app virtualization. There's the cost of the server that you deploy this on in the data center. There's the cost of storage and networking. There's typically a Microsoft license, We're working with Microsoft to see if we can obviate some of that for you. And then there's labor, okay? And we just worked with some industry folks to contrast the cost in the industry against what we would offer. And this is analysis we've done with analysts and us. And let me kind of work through what we're fundamentally trying to do. What we found in the cost was the biggest element of cost wasn't the cost of the VDI software itself. It was the cost of that converged infrastructure and the storage elements inside that, okay? So we began to work both on our own, because remember, we're a data center company. We're sort of owned a little bit by a storage company, so we know a little about storage, but we work with all the storage players. And we said if we could take a complete hack at that middle part, that sort of light blue part in the middle, by optimizing the data center for the desktop, okay, we can dramatically lower the cost by 30 to 40%. And this is breakthrough innovation, my friends. And that's what we're doing, okay? So the reason we believe now we've got a very new view to desktop virtualization is you should expect that the cost of this solution is cheaper than the cost of a laptop or a desktop, okay? And that's what we're driving. So that third column represents an optimized view where we use things like flash technology from some of our partners, or we use a technology called vSAN that does storage virtualization and makes that incredibly fast and effective. Let me end with this part of innovation on the product front with a notion of how we believe collaboration. So we talked a lot about desktop and mobility. One of the other aspects that are important is collaborative technologies. Because, you know, we talked about desktop, mobile, and social. The good news is that we are moving out of an automation era. The entire 80s and maybe parts of the 90s were about systems of record. ERP, CRM. I worked for one of those companies, SAP. Most of the ways in which we did things were hierarchical. They were rules-driven. We are now entering an era, we believe, that's a systems of engagement. We're moving from systems of record to systems of engagement. It's all about cloud, mobile, and social. People want to work in extended teams. If you are a boss of a hierarchical team, you're probably not going to be successful. It's much more influence-driven than command and control. And it's a lot more about the context than the actual rule. So as you think about this world of efficiency moving to effectiveness, we think you need to think about social computing in the same way that Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn think about it, but applied to the enterprise world. So in that context, I'd like to share with you my second case study. And this is a company in North Carolina named SAS Institute. They are the leaders in predictive analytics. They are ranked typically almost every year by Fortune magazine as the best place to work at, okay? I don't know if we have any employees here from SAS, but if you are, congratulations on that recognition. Jim Davis, who is the chief marketing officer, is a personal friend of mine. But as we looked at the way in which they did simple things at their company, like collaboration, we began to partner with them to drive a new way in which they think about social collaboration with our product called SocialCast. So let's roll the video of SAS Institute.
We take pride in the fact that we're constantly recognized as Fortune's best place to work. One of the things that makes us a great place to work is that open communication. And communication's easy when you only have 500 or 600 people in a company, but now that we're well over 12,000, approaching 13,000, we have a challenge in terms of being able to communicate openly and being able to communicate across the globe. We were looking for a mechanism by which we could link our employees throughout the world and understand their experiences. People use the hub now at a surprising rate, and they tell us how things went that particular day out in the field with our customers and with our products. When we talk about SaaS and we talk about our core values, we want to be swift, we want to be agile, we want to trust each other, we want to be innovative. The hub helps support all that. It is in and of itself a swift and agile platform. It is innovative in terms of how it supports our work here at SAS. The fact that the hub runs on mobile devices is extremely important to us. That enables the employee to put a thought down, put it on record when things are happening. When you have an idea, you can post it out there to an interest group, and those that share the same interest will read it almost immediately, and you can begin a dialogue. An ongoing dialogue that might be an hour long, might be a day long, might be a week long. You can't do that in email, and you can't do that in a scheduled meeting. The hub helps bring us together.
If you go to socialcast.com, that's the technology we use, the product. We are offering now for everyone here at the conference a free trial for 50 users at your organization. Sign up today. I've made sure our product teams are available to potentially have all of you if you wanted to. It's pretty simple. Social Cast. Think about webcast with social. Socialcast.com. Check it out and make sure that we've got some really, really good deployments going. So let me now move a little bit in the remaining 10, 15 minutes to some of the soft part of what I discussed, which actually gets me motivated. Technology gets me motivated. I'm a computer science product person but the soft stuff actually is really the hard stuff. And I find as I've been at now VMware 5-6 months, and prior to that 7 years at SAP, the hardest parts are often the process and the people parts, okay? Technology gets quickly understood, but the process and the people part become the harder part. And if you were in business school, like I was, you sat through those organizational behavior classes and said, yeah, it's the soft stuff. And most of you now in organizations know that the soft stuff is the hard stuff, and the hard stuff is often the soft stuff. So let's talk about process. And I have 3 learnings that I want to share with you that we have sought to do. Certainly my experience at SAP and the way in which we transformed the company. Bill McDermott was my boss and CEO through 2010 to 2013 and bringing the company back. And the same thing has been the principles of what we've seen. Number 1, keep the customer at the core of everything, okay? Now, this is a trite statement. Everyone says this, but you got to live that philosophy in the way in which you act from top down. I think one of the best stories I've heard of is Jeff Bezos, who in his management meetings has an empty chair in his management meeting, and he says, there sits the customer, okay? And when there's a point of debate, he'll go to that fictitious chair and say, what do you think the customer wants? There are stories of often during the management meeting, Jeff Bezos is distracted. He's looking at a smartphone and there's a flame mail from some random customer who's trying to order something and he goes ballistic. That's the passion we need to have at the top level of an organization about the customer. Anything will interrupt us and we will ensure that we serve them within a 24-hour period or whatever it is. And when customers realize us, they realize we're not just doing business with a vendor, we're doing business with a partner that's going to last more than 3 weeks or 5 weeks. It's going to last years. So make that the philosophy, and that's certainly something. Number 2, look for multipliers. I love this picture because one of the fundamental principles of Archimedes was, he said, listen, give me a point on a fulcrum and I will move the world. And you all know this is a simple principle of a seesaw, of a lever, okay? If you're playing with your kids, I've got a 7-year-old and twin 3-year-olds. I can put probably all 3 of them on one side with the balance of my weight on the other side, okay? I just have to pick the right place to sit. And the notion of multipliers are really important, and that's why we're here. We believe that ecosystems multiply. And the more that you could understand that ecosystems speak often, the reason we're here at this conference, we believe MCPC speaks for potentially hundreds of thousands of customers. And the more that we can train and enable them. So we've begun to set up ways in which we will enable our partners often at a very low price because we want to ensure that they know the latest. I've picked a group of what I call MVP partners, our top partners where I spend personally a lot of my own time. Make sure you don't forget just about the partners as you think about the customer. Number 3, I love this picture, okay? And let me explain what it means. You've got to build your organization to be data-driven, not gut-driven, okay? I love this quote, in God we trust, everyone else brings data. So if you think about the picture on the left, everybody know what's the picture on the left? A picture of what? A hippo, okay? It's the highly paid person in the organization. You get it? Highly paid performance in the organization. What do hippos tend to have around the middle of their body? A big gut, okay? And generally, most often you'll find some organizations have the highly paid person in the organization, the hippo of the organization that says, listen, my gut tells me we should do this, okay? Let me tell you, and this is in the words of my friend Andy McAfee at MIT, the geeks will mop over the hippos any day in the modern way in which a data-driven organization. Make your organization data-driven. And then it's the complete level playing field. The more that you're analytical in being able to make decisions rather than drive things. This certainly the gut's important way in which you can test things. But I will tell you, the more that you have insights, I've sought to do that in every aspect of the way in which we drive business decisions, the way in which we balance headcount, the way in which we think about growth. And the more that you make your organization analytical. I love a great story, again, from one of my professors at Harvard Business School, Gary Loveman. he took on CEOs of Harrah's, and he said, listen, there is no less analytical industry than gambling, okay? So I went there, and these people are working the show floors, and I made sure, listen, I told these guys 3 things. You could get fired for not doing your job. You could get fired, certainly, for indiscriminate behavior, but you could also get fired for depending on your gut. And he didn't literally mean the 3rd thing, but he began to see a change in an organization where every principal, now the moment you get into Harrah's, they know at the point you walk in, okay, that you are a most profitable, high roller, and you're likely the person that's going to spend a lot of money at those machines. And if you can do this in the industry of gambling, you can certainly do this in every single industry. Let's talk very quickly about people, and this is probably the part that excites me the most, because we understand, listen, we can bring in lots of product, we can even tune our processes, but ultimately, the assets we have in an organization are on plane, trains, and automobiles. They're people. And the more that we fundamentally realize that we've got to invest in our people, the more we realize that that fundamentally is what is the variable that we can change. So let me talk a little bit about some of the principles of how we've sought to build a people-driven culture and a few of the lessons that I would share that are hopefully inspirational for you. Number 1, people think that the most important part of an organization is shareholder value. I agree, it is important. But there's a great body of research done by a guy named Len Schlesinger called the service profit chain that said if you looked at companies that had sustainable shareholder value and you looked at their processes way back from what they did, you found that they had engaged employees. And in fact, engaged employees served satisfied customers who became engaged customers, who in turn led to shareholder value. So what's the head and what's the tail? I submit to you that engaged employees is where it starts. The more that you could understand that your employees are who you need to obsess about, the more you understand that those employees who are obsessed and really feel that they're passionate about working for you will in fact serve customers. In fact, you'll have shareholder value automatically pop out. A really, really fundamental problem, because most often our tendency in business is to focus on the 2nd or 3rd circle rather than understanding that engaged employees are the most important things. So when you do town hall meetings, you take them seriously. When you do a simple thing like a staff meeting, you take them seriously. When an employee comes in to meet with you, you drop everything you need to be able to ensure that you're driving what their agenda is rather than yours. You spend an inordinate amount of time in recruiting. And one of the best recruiting tools today is LinkedIn. Okay? I love this because people will tell you things about themselves you didn't know they did, okay, on LinkedIn. I try to make Fridays a day where I meet as many people as possible who have reached out to me because they want to meet for a meeting. And typically you find there that you can begin to select and build the best and brightest organization by focusing on engaged employees. When I joined VMware, one of the things that I noticed about our organization, the group I was in, it had the highest attrition and the lowest morale, okay? And, people were worried, VMware is not really committed to end-user computing. Are you really a data center company? Are you an end-user computing company? And I basically said, listen, I'm going to spend my first few months not worrying about the product or the strategy. I'm going to ask this fundamental question. Who is on the bus, okay? Because quite frankly, the other questions of vision, strategy, technology, and organization will come second. The most important thing was who is going to be on the bus, who is going to help us, and where do we need to fill the holes with the best and brightest from other parts of the industry. And that's what we've done, and we're in that journey. I will hardly tell you that it's over. It's a continuous way in which you've got to focus on people, ensuring that who is on the bus. This is a quote from Good to Great. The more that you have that type of leadership that our MC talked about, that Shackleton had, the more you build that into the fabric of the organization. 2 other quick points on leadership. I believe that the modern leaders think about leadership in servant fashion. Most often, when an employee is working for you as a manager, you expect them to serve you. It's about you making me look good. How about we invert that pyramid? The 21st century is about us serving our employees. And I love this quote. This is from one of the freedom fighters in India, a great poet named Rabindranath Tagore. He said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. And I'm not saying that all of us need to kind of get up in arms and do social service. Certainly community service and giving back to the community is a great way. We've made that a priority where the month of October is all about month of service. That's a good way in which you foster teamwork. But this has to invade the way in which we think about management. And if you're leaders in an organization, the more you can build this level 5 servant leadership in an organization, you will find you get engaged employees. And finally, I thought I'd end with a quote for somebody that we know so well as we celebrated his life a few weeks ago, Nelson Mandela. It is not about the empire you build, it's about the cause. And most often, again, we find so many managers in life that are worried about the size of their organization, the size of number of people who report to them. The cause of what Nelson Mandela needed to do went on even for the 20-plus years that he was in prison. He was focused on the cause. And I love this quote from him. He said, listen, lead from the back and let others believe they are in the front. That's the spirit of in which you can build leadership. So I ask you, as I finish up my presentation, okay, who is going to lead this mobile cloud era? It's every one of you, okay? And if you can make a difference in the way in which you drive this, both in terms of the way in which you think about product, but also process and people. If you have questions about this, you can send me an email. It's first initial, last name, spoonen@vmware.com. I love engaging with you, but don't be insulted if I come back asking you how we could partner to actually make you successful in technology use. Thank you very much. Have a good conference.